Well, welcome back to Aurora Airways, everyone. I'm Jordan Bianchi, your host, and today I'm here with someone I very rarely talk to. Just kidding. I talk to Amanda at least once a week. We text all the time because she's my writing partner for a big podcast that I've been working on, The Midnight Hearth. We've been working on this for the past 5 years. We've been writing accountability buddies, editing partners for the past 8 or 9 years. We met in college. We sat next to each other in an English class. So for the past 12 years, we've been sharing stories, talking about books, talking about movies, and really being a support system for each other. So I'm so glad that you guys can all meet Amanda. Hi.
Hi.
How
Thank
are
you. That was
you?
such a nice introduction.
There we
I'm
go.
great. I'm great. How are you?
Good. I'm happy you're here and it's good to see your face. Normally I just
Yes.
hear your
I know
voice.
we hardly ever see each other's faces actually when we're talking. It's kind of trippy.
It
Normally
is
we're
kind of trippy.
always just sending voice messages back and forth, audio message. We're big into sending audio messages back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, just like chatting on the phone for hours, coming up with amazing ideas.
So Amanda is in Philadelphia. She's got a great setup there. And Amanda, why don't you tell us little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I am a writer and an editor. I've been writing for a very long time. I've been writing creatively since I was like 8 years old. Um, I wrote a novel when I was in fourth grade called Wolf Warrior. Still have it. And I love writing, but it took me a long time to I took some time away from writing. I got kind of far away from writing for a bit. And so I'd say, I wrote a lot when I was a kid, and then in the past probably like 10 or so years, I've gotten a lot more serious about my creative writing, about pursuing a creative writing career, trying to get published, trying to finish these bigger projects and put my stuff out there more. And that's my main focus right now is really trying to develop my writing ability, to develop my voice as a writer, to work with other writers like Jordan. And I also work with I've got some like ideas brewing with, my fiance Peter is also a writer and is interested in film, and we always are talking about ideas that he's working on and I'm working on, and just trying to live that creative life. um, and I write professionally as well. I've had jobs over the past 10 years writing, editing in all these different various fields. So I'm just a big time writer, and also I would say a great editor.
So Aurora Airwaves came to be. A large part of it became because of the conversations that we've been having. I think that the big thing that we realize, which I really want to talk about, is that when you're writing fiction, a lot of the times we feel that you learn stuff in college and you collaborate with people and workshops there, and then you have to go do it by yourself. You have to disappear and write your novel. But what we've found in the past 10 years, is that not only does that not work, but taking on huge projects by yourself in your own little silo without talking to anybody can just destroy your spirit and your enthusiasm for everything.
Hmm.
So Aurora Airwaves really did come to be in a lot of ways because of our writing partnership and friendship. A lot of our conversations started off purely as writing. And this was even sending our novels back and forth to each other and getting feedback, and that was the core of our conversations. And in the past few years, especially since the pandemic, I would say 90% of our conversations are about how the heck do we take care of ourselves and have a healthy mindset when writing.
Hmm.
And I feel like through that, we've in regular conversation and regular collaboration, we've just grown and healed so much as individuals. And the more you do that, the easier it is to write the stuff that is meaningful to you. So I think in a lot of ways, this big podcast we are writing The Midnight Hearth has been a laboratory, as I like to call it, a laboratory of just how do we operate? How do we work? And when do we get in our own way? And I think that it's just been phenomenal being able to experience, a big I think a big career changing project with you. So
Hmm.
you are an Aurora to me. Wow. How
Thank you.
nice.
Wonderful. Yes, I would agree. Same to you, because I think that there were there were a few different factors, I think, in reconnecting me with my creativity and getting me involved in, like, writing again. But I think, like, of the when I think back to that time, like, mm, 10, not quite 10, well, it was probably like 2015, 2016. Is that around when we started sending
That's when we
um
started studying the
our
book.
writing back and
Yeah.
forth? I think that it was like around then when, I mean, there were a few different, like, I think I had started writing again before you were sending me things, but it was
Hmm.
all kind of coming together around the same time. And it was me feeling kind of like a lack in my life, and wanting to, like, having an urge to be creative. But it was also, I think, and it was also like that my best friend Amy, like, started doing these
Hmm.
writing competitions, and she urged me to join and do it with her because she was having a lot of fun and she thought that I would enjoy it. So it was that. And then, but it was also you sending me these things you were working on, asking me to edit them, because I don't even think I was really writing so much at that point. I think it took me a while
Of
before I
course.
sent you anything.
Yeah.
I think you sent me stuff, you were asking me to edit it. And as I was working on, reading it and editing it, I just had this feeling like, why am I not doing this? Like,
Hmm.
I should be writing. Like, this is so fun, and this is so cool. And, like, Jordan's writing this story, and this story is, like, so neat and interesting, and, like, has so many aspects of, I still think about so much. And I'm not sure if this is still in um your story as it stands now, but something that I think about a lot is that part in the early drafts of your story when they get to that, like that frozen pond kind of with the tree, and then there's all the little fishies
Oh yeah.
underneath, and they light up all these different, like, reds and oranges as they walk on them, like all the fish. Like, I think about that all the time. I hope that if that's not in the story anymore, I hope you put it in a different story, because I think it's an image that I remember a lot. I'm like, wow, that was so good. That was really cool.
Well, I'm glad you said that because I think that's a precursor to like seeing how the Northern Lights fits within it all. Because like the way that the little fishies were
That
like
was an
I think
aurora.
they thought they were fishies, but they were
Mm,
flickering waves of light that were like in their own like soul colors, and then that's what burst into them and activated the power.
I
So,
see.
because I thought of it like,
Yes.
if they were like fishies in like water and they were flowing around, it was kind of like what you'd see in the sky, but they couldn't quite identify it.
Hmm.
So
Yeah, yeah,
there you
that
go.
makes sense.
There you go,
Yeah,
folks. Auroras
that was
can't
some
forget
good. That
them.
was that was some great stuff. So yeah, I mean, I remember, um, like, seeing you work on that, and helping you with that, like, providing feedback, kind of talking things through with you. And then when I sent you my book that I was working on and getting your feedback and talking through things with you, like, I really, that was one of the it feels like really it was kind of like those three factors. Like that, you were definitely one of the main, and you've been there. So now you've been there for like every step of that journey with me of like,
Yeah.
rediscovering my creativity. And then you also like you that was when you were starting to like explore writing more. You were more image based, more film, and
Hmm.
you were interested in getting involved in writing, and you've done so much writing since then.
Yeah. Yeah, I have. I mean,
Yeah.
back then it was a means to an end, and I hate to say, well, it wasn't, and I think that's where it kind of got frustrating and weighed me down. Um, Trying to get a lot of bigger films made and having some success with that at post college, but then being frustrated by limitations I was really putting on myself or way too big expectations and trying to meet those. But the book I was writing always felt really good, but then it started to not feel good when one, people weren't able to experience it and I wasn't able to talk about it and share it. And then two, when I was doing what I was doing in the film world, which was just trying to get it published and sold and make money off of it. And
Yeah.
that's just it's a very dangerous place for a young artist to be right when you leave school, to feel like you have to sell, 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 sell. And it's like, no, you have to grow and learn and try things. So, yeah, I mean, I'm glad you pointed out like that you were editing for me for a little while, because that's what you did. I mean, a little bit of context, like Amanda like was a copy editor at the Oswegonian, the Oswego
Mhm.
paper, and she was just heavily involved in the journalism and writing scenes. Um, and I think it's just so cool that like you were excited about editing my stuff. And it was
Yeah.
just this neat energy of like, oh, this is someone who wants to participate in creativity in a way that I don't necessarily like doing. Like you loved like doing all the grammar and all like the meticulous things, and I was just like, let's just get the big ideas out. What are the big sweeps? What are the big passionate moments?
Yeah.
And so like within that, I saw like a very different energy than my own, but one still filled with passion and excitement. And it's like, let's go, let's do this.
Yeah.
So from really from like day one of like sending you my stuff after college, it was like, this is a safe space. Like I wasn't sending stuff to tons of people, and we definitely weren't as close of friends as we are now at that point. But intuitively, I was like, I can trust her. She's got great ideas. She can see where I'm going with a lot of these ideas. So it was just so wonderful that within that experience, you started to, like you're saying, you started to talk about writing more, and you started to do those writing competitions, and you started to do your own book and write the
Mhm.
stories. The big thing that I think we realized is the benefit of putting stories out there into the world, putting material out there, and like not everything has to be a huge orchestra. Granted, that's what we're doing with our podcast, and that has grown into the craziest, biggest story that. Like, let's be
Yeah.
honest. Like, if we knew this is where it was going a couple years ago, I don't know if we would have like jumped into it.
Yeah. I
Our
feel
our
like we would have been
brains are
like,
like so
we
much
need to
bigger.
stop. No.
Literally.
It
Like,
is an orchestra. Describing it as an orchestra, becoming an orchestra is such a good way to describe it because it does feel like more and more instruments just keep coming in. Like, I don't know how
oh
many
my
pieces
gosh.
this orchestra is, but it is massive. It's great.
But it's so cool because like we would not have learned how to hold on mentally or energetically hold on to a big story if we didn't have each other.
Mhm.
And we should talk about that a little bit, but I think a little more, but I think that like a big takeaway for like any writer in their 20s or any writer who hasn't written a book or done a big project, like if it's film, everybody thinks, oh yeah, I have to collaborate with people. That's what we do. And if it's writing, no, I have to do it myself. No, you do not.
Mhm.
Find Put your work out there, show people, figure out, who you're connecting with, and then take time to like write little stories and stuff and just see what's working, which dovetails into the point that I want to talk about right now, these writing competitions, because do like you and your friend like doing those writing competitions was just so healthy for you from what I saw.
Mhm.
And I could see it from afar. It was giving you the confidence in writing more and more stories in the format that we were trained in school, flash fiction.
Yeah.
And you did more of those, and you did more of those, and then you got your website and you started putting them on there, and then you started sharing them more in your story. And there's been this. I've been thinking of like the lotus flower lately, like the way that it just opens up and blossoms, and it's just like such a radiant symbol of peace and structure and fortitude and stuff. And so I've learned so much from seeing your approach to the fact that like the satisfaction that comes from writing a short story, even if it's for you or it's for a 48-hour competition, can be life changing.
Mhm.
So you've taught me how to write through helping me hone in on those little moments. And that's a lot of what we talk about too, right? Like you can't avoid your
Mhm.
life and you can't avoid the little moments of life and just pursue all the big projects all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that the flash fiction writing competition and also the short story writing competition, although that
Mm-hmm.
one honestly took me a really long time to um be able to tackle that one more effectively. I really think that flash fiction is, and Lee Wilson, our professor, our flash fiction professor at SUNY Oswego, I think she said this too, like that flash fiction is just this medium. I don't know if it's a medium genre. I don't really know what you call it.
Yeah,
Form. It's a form. Like
it's a
this
form.
form is really
Yeah.
going to, it really tests like your ability to tell a story and to understand what is involved in a story and what makes a story good. And I think it's very challenging. It's much more challenging than I think I thought that my stories were just too big for that form when I was in college. Like I was just sort of like, I don't know what story I can write in 1,000 words. Like, how are you supposed to even do that? Like, how are you supposed to like fit like anything in to this story? But like, I think it's having to figure out how to tell a story in less than 1,000 words just strips it down to the elements of like what makes a good story, and it's really
Mhm.
in the sense of like something shifting just kind of slightly, like even just slightly, but like your character has to go through some kind of a journey in those very few words. There has to be something that changes.
Mhm.
And there also have to be kind of like compelling scenes and images. And to figure out how to do that, to have the compelling scenes and images, and to also not forget about your character and make sure your character is going through some kind of a journey, some kind of a change, that is
Mhm.
so incredibly hard. That's really hard. Like,
So
uh,
that gives you like 250 words to like set the scene as
yeah,
best as
you've
you
got to
can.
like just get in. You got to get, it's so like, it's so fast, it's so, but I think what it is though, that's what it's why I think it was so great for me to, like, why I think I grew so much as a writer doing those flash fiction competitions, which by the way, it's the flash fiction competition thing that I do and that you've done a few times. It's NYC Midnight, and they do flash fiction and short story once a year. They also do, I think,
They do
they definitely do short
screenplays.
screenplay. I can't remember if they
Yeah.
do short screenplay and regular screenplay. I've never done the
I
screenplay
don't think they do a
ones.
regular screenplay.
No, they just do short screenplay. Because I couldn't remember if they did like a
They do
like really
poetry.
short and then like maybe like a slightly longer
Oh.
one. Because they do flash fiction and short story. But I think
Mhm.
maybe they just do screenplay. And it's like a short screenplay. They also do like microfiction. I did that once.
God,
But they do
that'd be
these every year. The microfiction's really hard, yeah.
hard.
I I have one that I like that I wrote, and um the other one I did not like at all. It was not good. Microfiction, it's too hard maybe for me at this point. Uh, Ernest Hemingway already did that with the uh baby
With
shoes for
everything.
sale, never worn or whatever it is. Um anyway,
The 6 word story. Yeah.
yeah. So I I think the reason so, like, I would do the flash fiction competition every year, and the flash fiction competition, specifically this competition, is so great too because it allows you to definitely write 2 stories. Um, because there's
Hmm.
2 stories in the first round, and then this combined score tells you whether or not you make it to the next round where you get to write another story. But it was so great that I got to write these 2 individual stories with some time in between, with totally different prompts, like the genres varying wildly, the assigned prompt of like you have to include like some kind of random object or some specific location that makes it another level of difficult. Um, but it was just such a great um way to just really practice and with surprisingly with kind of like well, with like stakes, but also like low stakes because like it was just for a competition. Like I wanted to do it because I paid money to be in the competition and I
Hmm.
told people I was doing it. And so I wanted to do it because I'm a good student who does what she's supposed to do. And so I was going to do my assignment. Even if I do it at the last
Another way
minute,
that we're
I'm going to
different.
do it. Yeah. I'm gonna do it, and I'm not gonna. I unless there's really serious extenuating circumstances, I am going to get that assignment done, and I'm gonna do a good job because I'm not gonna just turn in. Occasionally, I'll turn in just like shit, but like I try not to do that. Um, and but it also was low stakes in the sense that it was not vulnerable necessarily.
Hmm.
It was just, okay, I'm writing the story because this is the prompt, and it's really not connected to me in
Right.
any kind of, like, personal way. It's just a story that I have to write because I have to write a story. And I think I wrote a lot of stories that weren't very good because of that, because they weren't connected to me, but I did write them. And
There you go.
that was more practice, and that allowed
Hmm.
me and now when I look back at those stories, those aren't the stories that I'm submitting around for publications because I can tell I'm like that story was um impersonal. That story was not connected to me really in any way, and I can see why it didn't do very well. It's not really a very good story, but I it was necessary to write all of those not very good stories in order to figure out how to write a good story.
I think it's tough in the real world to get a catalyst that actually gets you to start writing that works for you. I mean, when you're in
Yeah.
school, you have those deadlines, and like you're saying, if you know if you are a good student and the deadlines mean something to you, or you have a reason to get it done. I mean, I was never this. I mean, I got my work done, but I was always more excited about doing it on my own. But I think that like the flash fiction competitions are just a unique place where like what you're saying, like you can just get stories done. And I think that well, I know that like young writers and writers in general just need to write a lot of stories and experience, oh wow, this is really me, I'm really pouring myself into this, or I told a really cool story but I'm not actually connected to it.
Mhm.
I mean, I felt that with the first one I did, like a ghost story, and I've seen that with a
Mhm.
lot of other things, ghost stories or supernatural kind of things that I thought were the angle that was best suited to me. And I guess in terms of form and aesthetic and things like that, yeah. But then you learn like, oh, if I want to tell the powerful story, I really have to pour myself into it.
Mhm.
But the
Mhm.
competitions are a great way to like get the practice that you need, and you get the practice in. putting it on the forums and getting feedback from people that you don't know, which is so healthy, because then you start realizing like these stories are important, but they're not precious.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that like we've both found frustration in keeping our books precious.
Yeah.
But really, I think that when we say that, it's just a form of self sabotage, because it's saying that like, okay, this is something that's really close to my heart, but why aren't you connecting with it? Why aren't you basking in the energy of your heart? And it's like, oh, well, at that age, we weren't ready to do that. We
Mhm.
weren't ready to really start looking at all the things from our past and our childhoods and start to like let stuff go and move energy. And as soon as that energy starts moving, oh my gosh, it's so easy and cathartic letting those stories out. Like
Yeah.
that short story that you wrote about the camp. Um,
Mhm.
I just remember like reading it and I was just like, oh my gosh, like you can tell someone's the inner work that they've been doing based off of the shift in their artistry. And I was
Mhm.
just like, oh my gosh, like it's just so nourishing to see an artist talking to themselves
Yeah.
rather than just talking to the audience or the readership.
Yeah.
So I think Flash has like taught you that, how to be in conversation with the crowd, with the audiences. But then it helped you, give yourself that evidence that, wait, I can do this and I can really do this. And now let's take it to this new place.
Yeah. And you know what I will well, one I wanna say that I think that, that the, either The Hunting of Tula or actually, I think Flightless on the
Hmm.
Way to the North is like that for you,
I think
where it
so.
really feels like you are connecting with that younger or just like that like spiritual kind of like yourself in a way and
Like
being
that core,
vulnerable.
that thing that can fill you up,
Yeah.
but we
Yeah.
easily
Like
like push it down.
I think in Flightless, that you're confronting some of your own things that are holding you back or that you struggle with. And that was the same thing for me with The Other Side of the Tree. And you know what I think is interesting too about the flash fiction writing competitions is I wouldn't have written that story if not for the flash fiction writing competitions.
There you
Because
go.
but then it was like when that prompt came and I read that prompt and the prompt I think was like genre fantasy, location a campground, object a wooden chair, I think. And I thought about it for a bit and like that idea came and it was just like I got to write this. Like this is like I started writing it immediately like in my like notes app on my phone. I just started writing it and then
That's
went to
cool.
it was pretty much all written by the time that I got to the cafe. I was just editing it, but I just wrote it all like in one, it just flowed out of
Yeah.
me. And the thing is that like because I had been doing this flash fiction writing competition and I had been working on that craft, but also because I had been working on myself and doing that work of healing and that inner work of like trying to, just reckon with all the things that I've been through, all the things that I've struggled with and try to address those things. When that prompt came, I was ready for it.
Yeah.
I had done the work to be ready for that story. And I think that's something that I would say about, you know, writing on assignment. Like it can feel, I think a lot of people think it seems like, constricting. Like it's like, oh, but that's not what I want to write. Um, but also like it's like, but are you writing? Like what do you want to write? Um, Because if you're not writing at all and you want to be writing, why not write just anything? Just write anything because then like I get so excited with the flash fiction it's like I might get a great story out of this. Maybe I won't, but if the right prompt comes along and I have the right idea, I might have a new story that I love that I wrote that I wouldn't have written if not for that prompt coming along.
So in life outside of the competitions, when do you find yourself most able to write and be creative and express yourself? And when do you find that you just can't get it to flow?
Um, well, do you mean kind of like um time of day, or do you mean like frame of mind, or
Frame of mind when you, because we talk a lot about like, oh, I should be doing this, or oh, why am I not pursuing this thing, or like I have 20,000 ideas, why can't I get one of them out? How do
Mhm.
you like, what's the thinking that you might catch yourself in when you're not
Hmm.
getting an output that you think you should have?
I think that it's tricky. It's tricky. I think it's still something that I am trying to figure out and I mean that's why I'm doing the artist way because I'm trying to figure out how to be more consistently creative. I think for me it's setting myself up for success in the ways that I take care of myself and the ways that I make space for that creativity. So, I'm a pretty like I like having a schedule. I like having a routine. And I would say that like if I know that I am like going to go I like to go somewhere else. So like if I know that I'm going to go to the
Mm.
cafe on Saturday morning and I set myself up for that. Like I go to bed early, I know what I'm going to wear. I've got it like already figured out. I know that like Peter, my fiance is going to walk the dog. Like I know that I've got my backpack packed or whatever. I can get there and I can sit down and I can get focused and get creative much more quickly. And I think it's the same thing for like when I'm having a day where, you know, I woke up early, I don't have any meetings, I've gotten my work done at work, and then maybe like on my lunch, like I can sit and like just like because I've got this idea that's been brewing, and then I make the space to sit in my chair, have some like instrumental music playing in my headphones and like
Mhm.
just really like sit and like get focused into it. I think I can also do that like later at night, like after I've had dinner, after I've finished up chores and whatever. If I can just sit, with a cup of tea and have some like instrumental music, have a candle, I think you've really got to like obviously you also sometimes have to work just in those in between hectic moments, but I think there's something about just like setting the scene and setting yourself up for success that allows me to be creative in times when I'm not doing the competitions and I'm not forced to be creative in like a 48-hour period because that's a very different hectic kind of like intense energy. And I think it's also just sort of it's a little bit following your whims. Like if you feel like writing a story, just write that story. Like
Yeah.
write it when you feel like writing it because like if you don't, it's going to sit in your and I'm speaking from experience. It's going to sit in your notes app and you're not going to feel like writing it again. I don't know, for like years if not ever. Like if you feel like writing a story, just sit down and write it. Even if it's bad, at
And even
least
if
you
it's
can
not the
come back
story you're
to it.
working on.
Yeah, just write it. Like I think I've really been trying to teach myself to follow those whims of just like, oh,
Mhm.
it'd be cool to write this story. Oh, I already have like the opening line kind of like, or I have like a paragraph. Like just write it
Yeah.
when it feels right, because that's how I've written my 2 short stories that I wrote not because of the competition. It was that one day, it just was like I was like, "I should write that story. I'm gonna write that story." Like, I feel like writing it, and I'm just gonna write it. And I did, and I wrote them both in, like, just, like, kinda one go. The one I've
That's great.
revised a lot since then, but, like, that's the energy I'm trying to reconnect with is that, like, just following that whim. And if you don't feel like doing it, maybe don't. Like, I don't know, that's the thing
Yeah.
that I'm really, like, struggling with, is because I know to be consistent creatively, you have to show up when you don't, even when you don't want to, but also, I think you have to allow yourself time to rest and time to do other things. It's tough. I
Know
don't
the
know,
well.
how do you kind of, I mean, you're doing so much, working on this podcast, and,
Mhm.
I mean, and you have a full-time job as well. Like, how do you find like, what do you do when you really want to get creative work done?
I think the first thing is really carving out that space and knowing that things have to happen might have to happen before for me to have the clarity of, the peace of mind and know that that space is for creativity. I think that there are a lot of things that have to go into it, right? Like I have to have not had too much coffee, had to have eaten food, had to have slept the right amount. I know that and I'm getting better about what are the work obligations that actually need to be done versus will need to be done eventually,
Mhm.
or things like that. Once I have those type of things checked off, then I just have a breath of fresh air and I can, or like a sigh of relief, and I know that I can go and just be creative for a while.
Yeah.
I know I'm a big advocate lately of just following whatever excites you most. Like you need to follow that, and it doesn't mean abandoning your stories. But I think that a lot of times I find that I get really excited about an idea, and in the past I would say, oh, this one idea that I have is gonna make this whole book or this whole podcast or this whole big story. And man, I found the one little gem that nobody else has ever seen, and that's gonna be the thing. So I have to hold on to that fiercely. And it's as Brandon Sanderson puts it, a book is not made by one idea. A book is made by 1,000 ideas. And it's made by you.
Yeah.
You're the connective tissue, and that's where your creativity comes in, finding fun, interesting ways to weave all these random ideas together. So I think that it's if it's exciting, great. Work on the new story. But if that new story isn't developed, or it's just been around for a day or two, there's nothing wrong with keeping it in the notes app, but
Mhm.
only close out of the notes app when you're actually not excited anymore.
Yeah.
If you're jazzed by an idea you're working on, like I feel like it's important for me to have the confidence to, or yeah, the confidence to just say, okay, don't go to do anything else right now. Like take a breather if you want, but stay within this and keep mulling over what these ideas could be, and
Yeah.
then being safe and comfortable, being comfortable with the fact that it might all be garbage, but there might be one thing in there that is helpful.
Mhm.
I find that with the bigger projects, I can definitely be like, ooh, what's this shiny little object over here? That's not in this. It's a breath of fresh air. And
Mhm.
sometimes I think it's just more of escapism kicking in of how can I not be as focused and, you know, the energy that goes into writing a huge story. There's just so much thinking involved, for lack of a better word. There's so much thought thinking,
Yeah. Yeah. There really
and it
is.
can be
Yeah.
annoying and painful and frustrating. And I think that the trick is, like you're saying, it's not forcing yourself to have to be creative, but it's looking for those little bursts of aurora energy, really. Those
Yeah.
little flickers of light where you're like, I don't, and maybe that's it, really. Like, it's having the confidence to trust your gut.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I think that we will both, like, can both attest to the fact that our big books, these stories that we're working on that are huge, and I think they're going to be really powerful stories when they're done,
Mhm.
they've grown because we've grown, because we've done other things but that story. But
Yeah.
we haven't let the cool things go, right?
Yeah.
If anything,
Mhm.
like, I found my book has been like astronomically, um, I don't know, it's just grown so much in terms of the quality and the
Mhm.
messages and stuff like that. And I think you're finding that as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I am
So
absolutely finding that as well. It feels like it's hard to not, we've talked so much, and I think we've both just experienced so much um heaviness and kind of
burnout.
like a feeling of these stories not being done. Like this
Oh
idea of
God.
like, why is this
Yeah.
story not done? Why haven't I written this story already? Like I've abandoned it. I've been like, no, maybe this just isn't a story. I came up with this idea so long ago. This idea just isn't good. Like clearly it's just a bad idea and like I should just drop it. Or like, oh, I don't know, maybe I'm just not ready. Well, I think that's more the truer reason that I've backed off of it more is that I feel like part of it is like I don't think I'm ready to tell this story, in the sense that I think I just need
Right.
to do more work to prepare myself for this story. Because a way I've been thinking about it a lot lately, and the reason why I've convinced you to do NaNoWriMo with me this November, which I don't know, we'll see if we actually follow through on doing that.
Oh no, we will. We're gonna
We
get these
will? Okay, all
done.
right, we're gonna do it. All right.
No, I think it's a phenomenal idea. We
I
can talk
think,
about that too.
yeah, the reason why I really want to do that and why I have been trying to do all of this other writing and other work is that in some ways, and maybe it'll turn out that I'm incorrect about this and I won't be able to get my book done in November using this thinking. I don't know. I'm feeling positive about it, because what I think is that it just feels like a novel is just such a difficult, enormous, complicated project to tackle. And it almost
Hmm.
feels like to me that the idea that you, as a young writer, would just sit down and write a novel feels like the idea that, as like a freshman in college, you would just sit down and write your senior thesis. Like, you haven't done any of the work. Like, how could you possibly
Right.
write your senior thesis as a as like an undeclared freshman? You're gonna write your like, I don't know, you're like what which like I don't like, we didn't really have that as an English major. But like I know some major, like if you have your your dissertation, like what
We
you're
had
gonna
that
like you're gonna
film,
write your, yeah, did you have like a capstone or something?
the capstone. Yeah, yeah,
Um
we had our
yeah.
thesis, our big project. Yeah,
Can you imagine if you had been asked to do that, like the minute you stepped onto campus and they're like, "All right, let's go. Write your do it." Like that's what it
right.
kind of
It's
feels like to
laughable
me.
because it's just ridiculous. Like,
It's ridiculous. Like
but
how
it's
could you
like, why is it
possibly,
different?
yeah, why does it feel different? Why does it feel like you should just be able to sit, if you're a writer, you should just be able to sit down and write your novel, like, and I think it
Yeah.
depends on what your novel is about, like what your novel is. If your novel is very much based on your own life, and it's just kind of like a story set in the real world, um maybe you can just sit down and write it. If it's something that is like about things that have happened to you or someone you know. But both of our novels are sort of like, they like require a lot of world building, and also require like the creation of a lot of characters that are not that we've just, you know, cooked up out of nothing. Um, and I think that if you're writing a novel set in the real world, you have to like cook up your characters, obviously, but you might have based them on people you know, which is something I've realized I need to kind of do a little bit more of with my
Yeah.
book is kind of base them on people or characters and then go from there because I think I'm starting way too much from scratch. Anyway, that's an aside. But I just think it is crazy. It's crazy to think that um, you could just sit down and do that and end up with anything that was a competent like adult like written by an adult like so obviously I wrote a novel when I was in fourth grade but like it's not the kind of novel that you would um I just did it for fun. And I guess that's part of the thing that makes it so hard is it's like, okay, so I did that for fun when I was 8. Why can't I do that for fun now?
Mm-hmm.
But I think you grow as an artist and you care about your craft and so you want to do a good job.
So how do you define a good job?
Um Something that people are going to enjoy reading and something that's kind of going to stand the test of time. Like,
Hmm.
that's what it feels like when I want to what I wanna do with this book is, like, I want it to be, um, a book that, like, that would be something that, like, I'm just would be really proud to have this be my first book, and that I think like, that is in the tradition of all of the kinds of books like that I've loved, that meant so much to me when I was growing up. You know, I want to write the kind of book that would have been meaningful to me when I was, like, a little girl. And
Yeah.
that's a tough
But
task.
that's it right there. It's tough because it's you're writing for yourself. You're writing for that little you.
Yeah,
And it's like that's what inner child healing is when you go and you say, "Okay, well, how am I not showing up for the little version of me which is still within my consciousness and it's
yeah,
still what I am experiencing energetically?" How like doing anything throughout the day. It's like, are you checking in with that voice or not? And when you do, it just feels warmer and safer and more in the present and all those things. So I
yeah,
think that's gotta be it, right? Why it's challenging because anything that slows me down is when I'm like, how many views is it gonna get? How many publishers are gonna buy it?
mhm,
And it's like these are all the wrong questions because they're
yeah,
not rooted in any form of excitement.
yeah.
Wondering if how many publishers are going to accept something, or is it going
That's
to have
more
a
like
legacy?
anxiety. That's like anxiety
Yeah.
almost. Like that's worrying about how
And
it's
like
going to be
the
received.
answer.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's worrying. Yeah, yeah. I like what you said. It's worrying about how you're going to be received. And it's like, but by even asking that question, it's a form of self sabotage because no, you're not ready for it because it's not done. Because
Mhm.
the trajectory that you have in your mind and whatever, like of what that book is going to look like, is not where it's ever going to end up because you're going to be a different person when you get to that point.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
there is no way to to predict and to plan and to do that. It's
Yeah.
just like in life. Did we ever imagine we'd be? Did I ever imagine I'd be working at a salon,
Yeah, probably not.
shooting,
No.
doing social media and doing marketing? Did I ever
Yeah.
imagine? I don't know. There are a million things like
Did I
I have
imagine
about my
I'd be
life.
in Philadelphia and like I don't know, just, working from home? No, I mean, how could I have possibly predicted that I'd be working in graduate medical education. Now I know all these terms about graduate medical education and IMGs, and I know all these acronyms. Did I think I'd know about immigration? No, I don't know. How do
Yeah,
you
immigration law. Yeah.
there's no way to uh Like, I think that's a really good, point too, is that you're going to be a different person when this book
Mhm.
is finished. I
Yeah.
think you're gonna discover a lot about yourself in the writing of the book and trying to anticipate what it is that you're going to discover and what's gonna be marketable about it, what's gonna be sellable about it. At that point, it's just that's not it's gotta be done before you can consider any of that stuff. Like,
Yeah.
that's just going yeah, I think that's just a way to it also feels to me something we were saying earlier, um, about when we were talking about the writing competitions. I think another thing that those help with, and also something that feels like what's holding this back sometimes too, is just that perfectionism that, like, this it's got to be perfect. It's got to be the best book ever. It's got to be the most amazing thing that I've ever written, and I every single sentence has to be absolutely mind-blowing. Like, that's just going to stop you from doing anything. Um
Well,
and I think
define
that's
perfectionism. Like, how would you define like, be something being not perfectionism, sorry. How
yeah.
would you define something being perfect?
Ah, I just don't think that perfect exists. And I think that's the problem.
Right.
Like, perfect's not real.
But I think it's defining what that is. Because I
I think it's
right?
the perfect is the idea that there's nothing wrong with it. It's the best that it could possibly be, and that I'm just trying to think. I'm like, is there any piece of art that I would describe as perfect? I don't think there is. I don't think perfect art exists. I think by virtue of art being created, it's not perfect
Right.
because we're not perfect.
But we
Nobody
are.
is. We are and we aren't. Like, it's perfect in the sense that it is imperfect. Like, everything, every piece of
Right.
art is perfect in its own perfect way. Now the like etymology nerd in me wants to be like, what is the etymology of perfect? Like, what does this word really mean? Because I feel like it's such a like it's such a kind of it's been something that's like it's like a toxic idea, I think, that's held me back a lot. The idea of like, oh, it has to be perfect before I show it to anybody. It has to be perfect before I try to get it published. It has to be perfect before I submit it. And doing the writing competitions was such a way to be like, it's not going to be perfect. Like, I
Right.
wrote it in 48 hours. It's not going to be perfect. But is anything going to be perfect ever?
Well, it's a dangerous mindset to have because if you say something has to be perfect, it stems from the expectations that you have, right? Like your
Yeah.
definition of what is perfect in 10 years could be completely different, and it will be because of your perceptions and everything. So it's just
Yeah.
it's it's a way of like our egos, I think, being super strong, but too strong, and saying this is absolutely how something has to be. But I mean, like, if you went to a party and you said something stupid, you said, like, you had a great time, like, everything, the vibes are great, and you say one thing that's just
Yeah.
like, oh, it didn't land, or oh, that wasn't exactly what a fully formed thought. I mean, and a lot of people do this, including myself. Like, when we all do, probably. Like, you beat yourself up about it. Oh, why did I say
That's the
that
one
thing? Oh,
thing that
why
you
did I
think
not
about.
connect in that way? And
Yeah.
it's like, but you had a great time with everything else, and maybe you're allowed to be human. And,
Yeah.
you know, we don't need to censor ourselves, like, in limiting how we're creating and what we're putting out into the world.
Yeah.
Because you can't learn from shit that way.
Exactly. Okay, here is very interesting, the etymology of perfect.
Oh,
So, the original root of it in the Proto-Indo-European is coming from completely do. So, and then the Latin mean perfectus means completed, excellent, accomplished, exquisite. Um, Old French just means finished, completed, ready. And then the Middle English is when it, in the early 15th century, is when it was corrected to mean flawless or ideal. So originally, perfect really just meant done and done well.
There's something in that, in the way that it has developed into a sort of unattainable idea,
Yeah.
is exactly how storytelling, especially on a larger scale, becomes.
Hmm.
You have an idea that feels complete to you, and then you try to grow it for this other thing, and then it's incomplete. Well, maybe it's not quite there. And it grows into this thing that has to be flawless. Whereas
Yeah.
the energy, the Aurora energy that hit you in that moment when you were excited about a certain idea or whatever, it was complete because it was
Hmm.
saturation. Like, I don't know, like if you're experiencing something and you're immersed in it, isn't that the whole point? Isn't the whole
Hmm.
point of all this to get us in the present? I mean, I think that's why people don't read as much when they get older, because they're just not in the present as much anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that actually really, this is why I love etymology, because I feel like when you learn where a word actually came from and what it actually, like the journey that a word has gone on, you
Hmm.
can redefine it for yourself. So now it's sort of like, okay, so I have a tendency for perfectionism, but what if I redefine perfectionism? And what perfectionism actually means is doing something, completing it, and doing it well. Doesn't that sound so much more attainable?
Yeah, yeah.
Sounds like I could do a perfect job um with my
Well,
book.
it's a nice little catalyst of saying, like, of giving permission to change our definitions throughout the day.
Yeah.
And then saying, like, oh, this way that I feel about this old definition is different from how I feel about this current definition. Which one do I want to choose? This
Yeah.
one was filled with anxiety, and this one was filled with, you don't have to worry as much. You just have to show up and tie it with a bow. And, you
Yeah.
know, and maybe it's like we can never fully comprehend it in words. Maybe that's something that just gets lost. But the feeling doesn't get lost, does it?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I feel like I'm thinking about it now too in the sense of like how I often use the word perfect. And I think I use it a lot in editing. Um when like at work, I'll say something like, oh, well, it doesn't have to be perfect. And in that sense, I'm using the word perfect to mean flawless. I'm using it to
Yeah.
mean flawless. But that is the classical correction of what perfect meant. So it started to mean flawless and ideal in the 15th century. So like we've been operating probably because Shakespeare
We're
was
old
writing and then
souls.
they were like, he's perfect. And ever since then we've been like, yeah, I mean, he
Yeah.
is pretty perfect. He's
Well, I
pretty
mean, that's
flawless,
another
pretty
thing.
ideal.
Yeah. I mean, but I think that says it right there again, of like the longer ideas and form and all these things like have time to grow, then there are new heights that are reached. And then the definition of perfect changes,
Yeah. That makes me think
which is
about
cool.
old stories. Like, I just read
Hmm.
Gilgamesh for the first time, and I
Good
don't
for
think
you.
Gilgamesh is a perfect story, but
No,
it's
it's kind of hard to read.
awesome. It's kind of
Kind
hard to read. It's kind of weird. It's kind of like
of all over the
doesn't
place.
it's kind of all over the place. It kind of doesn't make a lot of sense in some parts, but there's something in it that's so universal, so timeless, so meaningful. And you realize, like, that's I forget which, but there was an episode recently of Aurora Airwaves where you were talking with somebody about this. I forget who, but just the idea of like, I think it was you, maybe it was something else, but somebody was talking about like just storytelling and like a
Mhm.
story, like just telling a story, like that is a communal thing. Like that is
Yeah, or Keith, yeah.
yes, that's right. It was with Keith. Okay, yeah.
Sitting around
And it's
or
like,
Elmer, sitting around the fire and talking to people has
yeah,
been a form of human expression since the beginning, and it's a vital part to community. Like,
yeah.
nobody was painting the cave paintings
That's what it
with
was. Yes. Yeah.
without the
People
intention of other people seeing
other
it.
they wanted people to see that. And I think that's the thing is like that Gilgamesh, it's not a perfect story, but it's a story that has stood the test of time because of the way that it gets at like the truest, most vulnerable parts of being human. And
Yeah,
that's what you should all I think that's like what is making like really good art has to get at, if you want it to be timeless, it has to like get at that like truest, most vulnerable things about being human.
and what a great way to practice that by doing flash fiction, because I think everyone's ego wants them to be able to write the big novel and to have a whole shelf of published works and all this other stuff.
Mhm.
But I think that like a novel is a collection of vulnerabilities, and a novel is like a friendship in a lot of ways. It takes years to develop it. It takes years to understand what it means to be a good friend, what it means to share in a way that is a deeper and deeper bond between two people. I mean, like I've said, like we've experienced that so much in the past couple years, especially, and the more vulnerable you can be with people in life,
Mhm.
I feel like, and I know from my experience, like it's even with from Flightless and The Way to the North, like that's a great point of like taking material that was sort of there, but then repurposing it with that inner fuel, that inner vulnerability, and being like, you know what, this is okay.
Mhm.
So practicing flash fiction is a wonderful way to see when you're telling a good story, but the vulnerabilities aren't quite there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think sometimes you have to write different genres than you normally would write. Like I learned so much from writing comedy.
Yeah.
And I was
Same.
howling with laughter when I wrote my short about oh, it was about the grill no, it was about the firefighters and the
Yeah.
the
Yes.
strawberry festival and the
Yeah.
fire. It was ridiculous. It was ridiculous.
You also wrote the was it I think it was rom-com, right? Was that the one with like the boxing and like the flowers?
Oh,
Wasn't that rom-com? Or was that
that was
actually like
historical
it was
fiction.
history, but you like made it silly? Yeah, I think that maybe
Yeah,
that's what
sort
it
of. There were,
was.
yeah, there were comedic elements to it. Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, the
yeah.
terrible story.
So you weren't forced to do comedy. You chose to do comedy there. You
Right.
yes, okay. It's different when you're forced to do comedy. Being
Oh,
forced to do
completely.
comedy is hard.
But I think it's fun because it's like by going at things in different angles, you start to see when you actually have vulnerabilities. And like I guess in that boxing story, I hate that story, but there was a moment like one line at the end and I don't even remember what it was about, but it was
Mhm.
something and there was some sensitivity and you were like, "Yo, cool. This is nice.
Yeah.
This is nice, you know?" And you said other
Yeah.
nice things, but that was just different and I'm like, "That's different." And that's cool because I can apply that and I can see myself like what that feeling is of being vulnerable in a different way.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's something that you could, use in another story. You found something
Yeah.
there. You said something that connected, and that can
Hmm.
be used in a future story. You could rework that story if you wanted to. Um, I think that's something like there's always going to be because we are creatives and we are writers, there's always going to be another story. We're always going to be writing some other story. And so it doesn't feel like anything needs to be wasted. Nothing needs to
Mhm.
be, or you don't have to just, use it all now. I think that's something that I've been trying to tell myself a lot with
Yeah.
the submissions is like part of me is just like, well, what happens when I get all of these stories published? Then
Yeah.
what am I going to have? Like
What am
it's
I
like,
if
well,
I don't have a story?
you'll have more stories because you're going to write more stories. Like you wrote all of these stories, like you're going to write more stories. And also the idea that like the stories you wrote the most recently are the stories that you're the most proud of. So imagine like where you are now versus where you were when you wrote those stories. You've done so much more like work, so much more healing, so much more like connecting with yourself. They're only going to get better from here. They're only going to be like better,
Mhm.
more interesting, um, more perfect stories. Um, and that's never going to stop. Unless you just like stop writing. But why would you ever stop writing?
Right.
Why would you
When
do
you
that?
when you look at yourself, at little you who wrote Wolf Warrior,
hmm
through that story, how do you see yourself at that age?
I think I even have a little picture of myself um when I was that age over on my vanity. Uh
Oh, okay. Aw,
yeah. And I actually there's a picture
that
of
probably
little no,
helps.
I'm too little in that picture actually. That's a picture of me and my brother and sister, but that I'm probably like 3 in that picture. I'm younger. I just see like, you know what? Let me get the binder. Let me
Yeah.
hold it.
Yeah, let's see it.
Okay. So here's Wolf Warrior.
Wolf Warrior
Um
by Amanda Bintz.
my first novel. I
I love that
think
you have that right there. It's just so
it's right here.
wonderful. Yeah,
I kind of created like a little like sort of like shrine to my childhood over here. Like I've got my children's bookshelf, got Wolf
great.
Warrior, and then I also have my I don't know if you can see him. I've got
Wait,
my
what a
little favorite this is my favorite stuffed animal from when I was a
Oh, okay.
kid. He's Jolly. He's the goat from Hunchback of Notre Dame. Uh and then I have this little um chest of drawers that I got at a thrift store that I have like all of my little childhood like totems in, I
Oh,
called them.
wow.
So I have like all of the little like
Little
jewelry that my
trinkets.
dad gave me when I was a little
Mm.
kid and like all of these little just all these little kind of remembrances that I've held on to throughout
Mm.
my so I put this together the other night. I was like, I'm gonna have like a little sort of totem to past me and keep it close
So good.
to try to stay connected. So I think, when I think about the me who was writing this, it was just like pure like passion and love. Like it was like I was a wolf girl. I loved wolves and I loved reading. I loved reading and I loved writing. And so I was like, I want to write a cool story about wolves. I'm going to write a cool story about wolves. And then I just did that. and that was and then I asked my dad to print it out at work. He printed it out at work for me. There's the title
Oh my
page.
gosh, it's
My dad
fantastic.
printed it out at work
Mm.
for me, and I put it in this binder, and I brought it to school, and I showed people, and I had my mom read it and like edit it for typos
See,
and stuff.
it's just amazing. Kids have all the answers. You just like did
You
all the
just have
steps of
to
creativity.
just be who you were when you were a kid. That's all you have to do because like I was so proud
Yeah.
of this. I showed it to everybody. I was like I talked about it. I people thought it was so cool. Like and then you just realize like that's what you have to do now. You just have to write your story because it's cool and you want to write it, and then you ask people to help, people who
Yeah.
can help you get it out there, like my dad who printed it for me at his insurance office, and then you you just share it with people, and then you put it on the shelf and
I mean,
you
you're
get it out
beaming
and you look
talking
at it.
about it. You're
Yeah,
beaming, and I love that
I
it's not
love
like
Wolf Warrior.
it's not Wolf Warrior by Amanda
Yeah.
Bintz. It's Wolf!
It's
Exclamation
Wolf
mark. Warrior!
Warrior
Exclamation mark. Underline, underline.
by
By
Amanda
Amanda Bintz!
Bintz.
Exclamation mark. Stars
There's
and
so
moons
many.
and oh my
Yeah,
god! And then it's
moons and
like you open it
stars.
again. You
Yeah,
open it
and
to the
then
first
it's
page, and what does it say? Wolf Warrior. Just in case you forgot. And like the most like intense
it's
font.
so
The only
yeah,
like
like
the
this.
only font that's more intense than that's the hieroglyphics font. Like,
Yeah, right. This font, this word art. God, I
Woof.
miss word art. Word art was amazing. This is the energy that that I'm trying to recapture so that I can
Oh,
write
you're
my second
succeeding in
novel.
it. You're succeeding in it. And I mean, like, we're seeing it more and more and more through everything. I mean, even like, I mean, sometimes it's tricky to pinpoint that, but even in the Midnight Hearth, like, it's gone from the years of just like having to be intellectual with what we're doing because of the world building and how
Hmm.
like complex that whole world is.
Oh yeah. Hmm.
And when we talk about etymology, like looking up like what words in like ancient Sumerian and
Yeah.
Egyptian and Polish and European and French and it's all
Hmm.
there. So it's cool that I can see and you can see where that stems from.
Yeah, that is really cool. And that's where, you establish it feels like now we've with Midnight Hearth that we have established all of that. We have all of those building blocks and all of that I don't know, like that
Like
canvas,
the
that
ingredients.
palette, and now we're just like
Yeah, yeah,
painting
yeah.
with it. We're just like
Mixing
I
colors and
it feels like
eating the
now
paint.
we know all of that. We're just, yeah, we're mixing it. We're finger painting it all together and it's great.
You've been doing something which has really piqued my interest of submitting to journals. This is
Mhm.
something that kind of goes against, not goes against, but I guess my mindset has always been in like build the thing, create the thing, do it yourself. But you've gone about the angle, which I've learned so much from, of put your shorts that you've been working on that helped you grow the whole time, put them out into the world. There are so many outlets, and
Mhm.
through researching how to submit in an effective manner, you found there are so many publications that are like, we literally we want to share your stories with the world. Like we want you to be out
Mhm.
there.
Yeah.
Talk to me and us about that whole process.
Sure. And I am working on sort of a blog post slash social
Ooh.
series type thing about how to submit. Um,
Oh, good.
and it's still in the beginning stages, kind of just like a brain dump of all the things that I use, and I've been trying to refine it and sort of because something that's very difficult about it is that submitting is very individual. That there are
Okay.
things about it that are universal, and I'm trying to identify the things that are universal versus the things that are specific to me and my writing and what I'm looking to accomplish. Because, you know, I've figured out over time that I'm primarily looking to submit to like genre literary mags because I'm writing fantasy, sci fi, horror, thriller. That's the kind of stuff that I have. And so that's kind of a totally different um, subset of journals are genre journals. But if your thing is poetry, that's totally different. I don't really know much about poetry submissions at all. But I think that like with the submitting, that it's been just really like it's very it does feel very like um I don't know, just hard to get your head around, I guess. It feels I don't want to say like necessarily like gatekeeping, but like a little bit like just sort of like what's the word? Like obfuscated. Like it's it just seems like it's kind of hard to figure out where to start. It's hard to
Hmm.
figure out what you're supposed to do. It's hard to figure out what is expected of you or um like I didn't know where to start. I just like Googled literary magazines and then of course was served like just a list of like probably like the most prestigious literary magazines of all time or something that it was just like, well, I'm not quite ready for that yet. I don't think that's where my stuff is ready for yet. But
And then you don't put
it's
stuff out
yeah,
because you
because
just see these big name.
I'm just
You
like,
just
oh
see
well,
these
I'm not
big
gonna
names,
get published in like the New Yorker or whatever. So like how am I supposed
right?
to get published? If I'm not going to get published in like the New Yorker or like McSweeney's or like some really a journal like that people have heard of and has cachet and like has like has their name out there, has been doing this for a long time. That's not I'm not at that level yet. Um and if I submit there, probably just going to get rejected. And that's not going to feel good, or I'm not going to hear anything at all. And so
Hmm.
I've been trying to figure out places where um, I can submit to where I think I have a good shot, that I think it's a good fit, and where I'm excited about being published there. Which you and I had a great conversation about this when I called you like in the morning, frantic, because I was like, Jordan, I don't know what to do.
7 in the
I have a
morning,
writing dilemma. Um,
and I was
but
like,
like,
"Ooh, I'm ready. I've been on call for this. I've been waiting for this my whole life.
yes,
A
I'm gonna
writing
roll out of
emergency."
bed, writing emergency. Those don't happen very often. Well, actually, for us, I feel like they happen kind of a lot. Writing emergencies. But there, but like it was that was something that experience made me understand more about what it means to be, and another experience that I had too of like figuring out like where are you excited about being published, because and you said this to
Mhm.
me about like follow your excitement, and we've talked about that throughout this conversation, like trusting your gut, like seeing a place and looking at their website, reading their description, looking at their guidelines, looking at their Instagram, their Twitter, whatever, and thinking, wow, like this place is so cool, like
Yeah.
this I would be so excited if this place, like look at their if they have any of their, they probably have the covers of their journals available to see, if not like the whole thing. You can see how they lay it out on their website and you can look at it and you can say, wow, I would be so proud to have my story in these pages. That's the feeling that you want to follow. Um, and that's
Because
what
that's
should,
fun.
yeah, it's
Like,
fun. Like you
which
should
is,
be
like, the whole
excited.
point. Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, you want to follow that fun. I think I said earlier like the whim, like you have these
Yeah.
whims of like things that you want to do, things that you're excited about, and that's what you should follow, because as you and I talked about a lot, like the submissions aren't necessarily going to, it's not like I'm going to get a story published in a journal and all of a sudden I will be a writer. Like all of a sudden I got a book
Mhm.
there, here's my book deal. They read my story and now they're going to give me, an advance to write my book, and all of a sudden I get to be a writer full time. Like that's not how it's not like the dots don't
That's not the
connect like
function
that.
of it.
No, the function of it, and you and I talked about this a lot, is the idea of like it's more evidence to yourself that you can put yourself out there and you can be successful in this, that people are interested in your work, they are interested in publishing it, and it's just some like it's proof to yourself that you can do this.
I think that like there are two big things there of like one, like people do want to put out your work. There's always someone who wants to. I mean, depending on what stage you're at, there's so many out there. But
Hmm.
it's really that act of putting yourself out there
Yeah.
that's the most important thing, because then you see that nothing bad's going to happen.
Yeah.
And that's the only reason we don't do it.
You get
Like,
your
what's going to
first
happen?
couple of rejections. The first couple of rejections, they hurt pretty bad.
Sure.
I'm not gonna lie.
Absolutely.
They hurt pretty bad. I cried a couple times because the first couple of rejections feel, and sometimes they feel like a rejection of you entirely as a writer. Like, because maybe
Sure.
you've been having a hard time, you've not been feeling very confident. And then on top of that, now you get a rejection, like, and then your
Right.
world's like crumbling because you're like, see, I'm not good enough. See, like, this place doesn't want me. So that means that I'm not a good
Whoever would
writer.
want me.
No. That,
No.
yeah, exactly. It's like, "Whoa,
It's
play my
like,
tiny
no.
violin, like,
But I
no,
think
but
that
like,
that's it. Like, that's an actual thought, though, right? So, like, and
mhm,
whether you're aware of it or you're not, whatever triggers you within the wording of a rejection letter, the emotions that arise from you are not just like in that letter passed on to you and all of a sudden magically you have, it's like, no, 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 no. There are belief systems that you had about yourself and your own
mhm.
self-worth, your own self-esteem, or whatever, that because of the specific wording in that letter, they
Or just the
rise.
timing. The
Or
rejection
the
could be the
timing, yeah.
nicest. Sometimes the rejection could be so nice, it could be so complimentary, but if it hits at the
Sure.
wrong time, it can still trigger those feelings within you of worthlessness
Oh
because it
God, I
just hit at
remember.
the
I
wrong
remember
time.
that totally. It can shut you down for years. Which is a question I have for you. Would you recommend that when people are submitting that they have like what we have? We have a writing accountability buddy, writing partnership kind of thing. It doesn't need to be someone they're writing with, but a safe person that they can talk to about this stuff. Because I know in my life when I didn't have, when like when we weren't collaborating like we do now, I remember like receiving feedback from a feature script from a professor
Mhm.
in Brooklyn, and I was back in Buffalo at the time, and I remember like thinking this was like the shit. This was like an awesome script, and then
Mhm.
him saying, it's not quite there, but don't give up. Don't take this as like a bad thing. Like you're, and I remember just shutting down.
Yeah.
I remember
Mhm.
saying, "Crap, I'm serving now. I'm not in New York right now, and now I have to put more time into making this, and I don't have the answers."
Yeah.
So, is there a benefit in your eyes of like having someone that you can share this experience with versus
I
just
think
sending it into the
so.
abyss?
Yeah, I think so, absolutely, because you know what I think that you need to have these multiple streams of creativity, like multiple kind of like outflows, multiple like because multiple
Channels?
channels. Yes, that's the word I was looking
Ah,
for. Thank you.
look at
Multiple
that. Okay.
channels of like creativity because for example, like if if I get a rejection that really sucks. It's like, yeah, but you're also doing the short story writing competition, and pretty soon you'll get the results for that. And you think you did a really good job. So, like, that's going to be a big boost. And also, like, you and
Hmm.
Jordan are making really great breakthroughs in Midnight Hearth. And, like, that's really exciting. And also, like, you have some other submissions that you're really excited about that might work out. And also, like, you have this one story that you really want to write and you've been making a lot of progress on your book. Like, I think you just need to have, when you have all those
Yeah.
different channels, if you experience a setback in one of them, it's not a setback in your entire creative life. Like, you can't give it so much weight. You can't put that much pressure on, like, these submissions are make or break. Like, they shouldn't be make or break. They should be just, oh, okay, that sucks, or wow, like that should that should be the two different like modes. Like it should either be like, okay, all right, that sucks,
But then if
but
you
I have
find
so
that
many other
wow,
things going. It when you have the wow, like that's when it's totally worth it for that wow. I've been getting a ton of rejections lately.
good for you. That's
I just got
awesome.
one last night. I got two. Actually, got two last night. I got two rejections, but you know what? I had a great. Didn't bother me really at all. I was like,
But
oh,
what a gift! What a gift for you to be able to experience that you now have rejections coming to you, and it doesn't seem like it's bothering you. It's
it
not
really doesn't
affecting your
bother me at
self-worth,
all.
which means
The
you've
only ones that are gonna
re-identified.
bother me is when I'm really excited about it. There's a couple that
Sure.
I'm really, really excited about, and like that I'm like, if like this, there's one that I have been like
Uh,
preparing for like 2 years to submit to this journal, and I revised the story. I worked really hard on making the story better and making sure it like fit their word count requirements, and I followed all of the guidelines to a T. And if I get rejected that, like I was just talking to Peter about this the other night. I was
yeah,
like, if I get rejected there, it's really going to suck. But you know what? Actually, I think there's some other journals that I could submit to where like
yeah,
I think it could actually really like I was like
and it's
it's
a
going to
great
suck,
story
but you
too.
know
Like,
what? There's other journals. There's so many other journals. And that's where my mind is going now is like, but there's
mhm.
so many other places to be excited about. If you get rejected from this one place, you'll find somewhere else. And that's
Well,
how
that's
you
it.
have to think about it.
Letting yourself be by letting yourself be excited takes you to the next place that you're not expecting to find, but that becomes a catalyst, and that catalyst gets you to move with your creativity.
Hmm.
Who knows where it's going to end up? But you wouldn't have gone and revised that story and brought it into a new light and brought your knowledge to it
No,
now in that way.
I wouldn't have. I wouldn't have revised that story if I didn't have that deadline for that specific journal.
Yeah.
And now I feel like it's a much better story, and that I because it's been rejected at a few different places that were like those rejections sucked. But
Mhm.
I feel like preparing it for this journal, it's in such a better space that I'm excited about other places where I could potentially submit it. And I think that's what I often compare submitting to applying for jobs, and it really is like applying for jobs because
Mm.
sometimes you apply for a job and you don't think there's any way you're going to get it. It seems too like it seems outside of your experience, and then you don't hear anything and you're like, yeah, I didn't think I was going to. That was way outside of my experience. But sometimes you do hear something and you're like, wow, that job, they think that I'm good enough for like that job. Or you apply to a job that you think like seems like a really good fit, but then you don't hear anything, and like that sucks.
Mhm.
Like it
Yeah.
just it feels like a similar, or sometimes you're really excited about a job and then you hear something and you do really well on the interview and you do well on the second interview and now you got the job offer. Wow. But how many jobs do you apply to versus how many job offers do you get? It's it's a huge, like you have to cast your net pretty widely in order to get any job offers whatsoever. And I think you have to think of submitting the same way. You have to cast like a very wide net, and you're going to get very little back from that. But like the what you do get back is going to be good stuff.
Do you want to show off your the printed one that you have in your little stack behind you?
Sure, why not?
Another little show and tell for
Another little
everyone. If
show and tell
you're gonna have to go to
is
the YouTube channel to see this great little
this
plug for our
one,
YouTube channel.
Luna Station Quarterly, which this one was so exciting.
Looks great.
And what page am I on? I should know that, right? Well, let's see. Oh, there's my $5 that I put in here. Is the $5 I
Oh, that's
got paid
good.
because I really wanted. I forget if I told you this or not, but I really wanted to like get a check. Like, so they paid me $5 for this story that they published, which made me a paid author. And I really wanted to get like the check and then frame it, but like they paid me through PayPal, and PayPal, in order to send a check, was gonna charge me like $1.20 or something to send me a check. So the check would have been for like 3.80 or whatever. And I was like, well, that's not that's no
That's not
good.
as fun.
So I think Peter had like a $5 bill in his wallet and he was like, here you go, here's your $5
Aw,
that you can frame.
symbolic.
So let's see, what page am I on? Skip hop jump 92. Here, I'll show you the just so you can see. Boop, boop.
Skip boop.
There it is.
Oh, that's so
There it
cool.
is. Oh, and I'm also, I think my name's on the back somewhere.
Is it?
Where am I? There I am. Right there.
Oh, there you are.
Yeah,
See, that's
there
so
I am.
cool. You're literally
It's
holding your
really cool.
story.
Yeah, it feels really cool. This will be in that article that I'm working on. Like this is one of the main things. This is one of my main motivators for what I choose is that they have a print edition because I do think really like being able to hold it and
Yeah.
put it on a shelf and like show it to people, that's a big boost. That's a really big confidence boost.
So this document that you're preparing for listeners, this will be available on your Instagram and it'll be available on your website, and it's a resource for if you want to submit and you want to get going and you want to just learn like what the context of this entire journey and then a
Hmm.
bunch of like tidbits on how to get going. That's
Yeah.
what that's going to be offered in it.
Yes, and I want to offer like a lot. I'm trying to gather together a lot of resources of the things that really made a difference for me in learning how to submit. Because I mean, I've only been doing this for like 2 years, and it's been, I mean, a steep learning curve over those 2 years.
Sure.
I didn't know like anything when I started. And
Yeah.
so I want to offer this to people who are where I was at when I started and I didn't know anything and I just Googled, Philadelphia literary magazines or whatever. Um, so it's going to have that. And I also really want to figure out a way to have my submission spreadsheet that I've made, like be
Hmm.
a downloadable thing, but I think I want to convert it to Google Sheets because I don't think a lot of people have Microsoft Excel on their
Yeah.
machines, and I don't want this to be inaccessible. So I think I'm gonna figure out. But I have Excel because I Microsoft Excel. I'm sorry, it's way better than Google Sheets. You can do a lot more with it. But if you don't have Excel, I would like to make it so it's accessible on Google Sheets, and then I could just uh, provide some kind of a download because I don't know. Maybe
Mhm.
everybody's not as overly organized as I am, but the spreadsheet is a big part of it for me. The spreadsheet is
Well, I
really
mean,
important.
like anything in creativity, it's the more organized you can be. It just takes the burden off the
Yeah.
thinking energy, so you can apply it to what you need to.
Yeah.
Um, well, that's fantastic. I'm so glad. I think a lot of writers are going to really hop on that. Or they should hop on that opportunity,
I hope
including
so. I
me.
hope it can
I'm going to
help.
be downloading this. I'm going to be looking at it because
Good.
it is a thing of like I guess it's like anything. Like, is it doable to learn all this stuff? Sure, but there's so many things to learn throughout the day. To like have people that clearly articulate what that journey is just so helpful
Yeah. That's what
because
I'm
it's
going to
really
try to
also
do.
a place of how do you market yourself, right? That
Hmm.
when you have those conversations, it's how do I talk about what it is that I do, and a lot of us don't. Most of us don't think about that until we're forced to. And so when you go along the journey of submissions, you kind of have to ask yourself, oh, well, or it gets brought up, like, what kind of writer am I?
Yeah. You
You
do.
know?
And you also have to really, you have to give a lot of thought to like writing your bio is a very interesting
Mm,
process of like learning to take yourself seriously and know how to like describe yourself like in an essay in 50 words, in like and I wanted to include kind of like sample bios that I use or like template cuz like it like my bio
mm,
has
that's
changed
good.
so much since I started and I really have come to a place where I'm like, yeah, this is my bio. Like this
Yeah.
is me. Like I feel good about this cuz like when you write bios for like the only other bios I've written is like my Instagram bio, which is usually just like a joke. Like it's like a short little like joke or
Right.
something. To actually think about like putting like a biography about me, that's a lot
That's
harder.
micro nonfiction.
Yeah,
Micro
exactly.
slash nonfiction.
Yeah, yeah, it's tough. So, that it's yeah, it's I will provide as many resources as I can. I'm gonna try to also make it not too long and not like more like accessible. So it doesn't feel like I don't want it to feel like another barrier. Like, okay, great, here's this how-to guide, but it's so long. When am I ever gonna have time to read this whole how-to
Right.
guide? So I'm trying to figure out how to make it, you know, perform the way I want it to, but also be really helpful and hopefully really accessible for people who want to get started submitting. And hopefully, it gets some people to submit, and hopefully, it gets some people some publications. That would be so exciting.
Even if you are writing all the time and you have so many years of experience under your belt, these are still conversations that regularly need to be had with all types of creatives. So for everybody who's listening, if you are a writer or creative in some form, or you're just dabbling, for fun, and you have all these thoughts and worries and insecurities about your craft, just know that like every single writer has them.
Yep.
And they
Hmm.
have them at every single step of the way, and that's okay. But the
Yeah.
biggest takeaway from anything is put your stuff out there and share it with people, and you never know who might be your writing partner 12 years after you meet them.
Hmm. Yep. Exactly.
You never know.
Yeah.
So, well, Amanda, thank you so much for being here. As always, great time.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited that I finally get to be on the podcast. I've been listening, I've been hearing about all the behind the scenes. Um,
True fan right
it
here.
is, yeah, I am. I'm like a number one fan. Left a review and everything. Yeah, it's very, very exciting to finally be to have been able to experience this space. And yeah, I would love to come back whenever you will have me.
Well, thank you, thank you.
You're
All
welcome. You're welcome.
right, we'll talk soon. Thank you for listening to this episode of Aurora Airwaves. I'm so grateful to have you here as the auroras take us on a journey through the night sky. Stay tuned. Who knows where they'll go next and what healing they'll bring us. Please stay in touch. Remember to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, subscribe to us on YouTube, and follow the show on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Please leave us a review, give us some likes, and let us know what you think of these episodes. We'll be in touch soon. Thanks again for listening.